Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. So thanks to Albert for his talk. Welcome to my talk on infrastructure as code with AWS CDK. So I'm gonna give a small introduction. Oh, let me drag this out. Yeah. So I'm Juan Castellanos, 32 years old, originally from Colombia and raised on an island called Aruba in the Caribbean. And I've been living in the Netherlands for the past 10 years. I'm a front-end developer at IO, and I work mostly with React, Next.js, Node, and I've been working with AWS for the past 2 years, a bit more than 2 years. I love coffee, programming, and making music. As you can see, my guitars. I also spend a few nights a week with a group called Palmera Bytes, where we work on Collabi, which is an event planning app built on AWS. So let me give you an idea of how I structured this talk. I'm going to talk about who this talk is for. I'm going to give a small introduction on AWS. I'm going to talk about infrastructure on AWS. Then I'm going to introduce infrastructure as code. Then I'll introduce also CDK. And to showcase all of this, I'm going to do a demo. And then after the demo, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of working with it. And I think at the last bit, we'll have some room for questions. Does that sound good? So let me start by asking in the chat, how many of you have experience with AWS? And you can let me know by typing a rocket, or maybe if you had a really bad experience, you can put a thumbs down, and maybe this talk can spark some curiosity to give it a chance again. So this talk is mainly for developers who are already working with AWS, or maybe you're curious about AWS, or you're looking for an alternative for your cloud solution, or you just want to learn something cool. So what is AWS? And this is from their website. Amazon Web Services is the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platform, offering over 200 fully featured services. It's quite a handful. This is a screenshot of some of the services that AWS provides. The first thing that comes to mind is like, so many services. Where do I even start? What do I need? Luckily for us, you can just start with about 10% of the services, and you can already start building some cool stuff. And AWS also provides pretty cool documentation and learning paths, so you can start your journey. So also worth noting that the market share for cloud platforms on AWS is the leader in the cloud platform market. And why this is important for us as developers is because there's a high chance that you will see it at your clients or assignments if you compare it to something like Google Cloud and Azure. And some sources say that AWS will eventually hit the 50% mark, which is quite remarkable. So let's talk about how do you set up your infrastructure on AWS. And the answer to that question is it depends, and it depends on what you need. So what do you need? Do you need a REST API? Do you need a static website, a database, or maybe you need a GraphQL API, or you need to set up a pipeline? And all of these things you can do on AWS. There are many ways of doing it on AWS. You can start really simple by building your infrastructure with clicks. And this is literally just, going to the console, filling in a few stuff. And for example, in this case, creating a Lambda function. and in a few clicks, you can have your Lambda function, up and running. You even have an integrated IDE to write your code. And this can be okay for simple solutions. I remember an assignment where we needed some Postgres databases, and it was temporary. And we just, used the console, made 2 Postgres databases, and used them like that because it was simple. We needed just that. And even though this is a talk about AWS CDK, I always encourage people to to look for the right tool for the job. So if we want something maybe more complex, we can try something like Amplify, which is a CLI tooling for full stack apps. Provides a really easy way to get started with front end and back end code without knowing too much about the pieces that are making it work together. My experience with Amplify has been great. We built Collabi with Amplify. The only concern for me was that sometimes, let me just show how Amplify works. It's like it's a CLI, and it will guide you step by step and create a whole project structure for you. And then you can select, which categories do you want to add to your project, for example, adding storage or an API or authentication, and it will guide you through it. And this is fine, but sometimes, these black boxes keep you from understanding what you're doing. For me, I had a case that sometimes I felt uneasy. Why should I use a CLI if I could just change some configuration files? And sometimes, the opinionated defaults can lack a bit of flexibility, even though AWS is working hard on fixing that with Amplify. But it feels like, we want something closer to us developers that write code every day. And this is where we get to infrastructure as code. And infrastructure as code is, simply put, the process of provisioning resources through code. And why would you want this? You want this to reduce the risks of bugs and deployment issues. You want to be able to replicate your infrastructure across environments, assignments, or clients. And you can also, test your infrastructure. So the most basic form of infrastructure as code on AWS is Cloudformation templates. Cloudformation is an AWS service that helps you provide resources, provision resources to the cloud. And you can use YAML or JSON files with instructions that, help Cloudformation provision your services. It's like making a grocery list for the cloud. So this is how a Cloudformation template looks like. This is just one resource, a DynamoDB table with some properties. And as you can imagine, this, if you have a few resources, this can be okay, even though I personally don't like YAML. But if it becomes more complex, then this is pretty hard to, understand and maybe read or keep up with. So if only we had something like this, but using the languages and skills that are, known to us. And this is where AWS CDKs enters the picture. So Cloud Development Kit is an open source development framework to define your cloud resources using, familiar programming languages. Because this can be quite challenging to perform your actions. So AWS uses familiar languages. It also has a lot of pre-configured defaults, and it helps you start up your projects faster. So There's support for Java, TypeScript, Python. You're going to use the skills you already know. It's predictable. You can compose your own templates. And AWS itself provides a lot of templates out of the box. On top of that, you can think that you're going to get, auto completion, good code documentation, and, also testing works out of the box. So we're going to cover a few core concepts of AWS before we get started. So first, we have an app and stacks. App is the root of your infrastructure, and this app can consist of many different stacks, and stacks can be groups of resources. So think, for example, you want to group a lot of resources that have to do with some form API that you want to build, or you want to group resources that have everything to do with authentication in that stack. Then we have constructs, and constructs are the basic building blocks of AWS CDK. They represent a resource or more resources depending on the levels. And this is where we get to the levels of constructs. So we have level 1, which is the lowest level, when a construct represents a one-to-one with a resource on AWS. Level 2 can be maybe a combination of related constructs that have a lot of standard defaults, and you deploy it as one. And level 3 can even be more opinionated, and it's very specific, and it's the highest level of abstraction. So how does CDK work? Think of your application. The application will be synthesized, and Cloudformation templates will be created from this. And then this can be provisioned on AWS Cloudformation into the cloud. So, okay, cool. This sounds really cool, but how does it really work? So we're going to do a demo right now to showcase AWS. We're going to deploy some stuff. So let me get some terminology, before I start with the demo, because maybe not everyone knows AWS or its services. So we're going to create a DynamoDB, which is a database. We're going to create an API gateway that serves like as a front door to our application. We're going to create an API integration that is the link between an API gateway and the Lambda function that we're going to create. I'm going to use an app generator called Progen, which generates a lot of configuration setup for our project. So you can only focus, on your developing, but everything you will see, you can do with the vanilla CDK setup. So what are we building? We're building first, the DynamoDB database. We're going to deploy that. Then we're going to create a Lambda. We're going to hook it up with an API, and hopefully at the end of the demo, we're going to see the creation of a new event in our database. So let me now go to my editor, even though I think I see in the chat, maybe we already have some questions. I don't know if you can see if there are questions, Dean.
No, there are no questions at the moment.
Okay. Awesome. Let's just continue on with the demo. So this is our project. And I outlined the demos that I want to show. For the sake of the demo, I already created the implementation details, so we can only focus on our CDK and our infrastructure. But I will, in the time that it deploys, I will explain, if I have the time, I will also show you guys the implementation details. So we're gonna start first with just a DynamoDB table, which we can do by, oh, and by the way, I already installed all the dependencies that we need for this project, just for the sake of, we can do this faster. And I will also provide this demo at the end of the presentation. So let's start with the DynamoDB table. I'm gonna do a new table. We're gonna give it the scope of the stack, then give it an ID, and then the last argument is gonna be the table props. And as you can see, I'm getting auto completion, and also if I click through, I will see all the things that I can use as options. So now I'm gonna define a partition key, which is like an index for NoSQL databases. A type at string. And then we're gonna put the billing mode on paper request, because if we put it on provision, it will try to do some smart stuff and probably will end up in some billing. And this is it. This is our definition of our table. So let's try to deploy this. We're gonna do progen deploy or CDK deploy if you already have everything installed for CDK. And the only thing you need is an AWS account, set up some credentials, and then install the npm project for CDK, so the CLI. If we do progen deploy, it will synthesize your code and it will try to create the Cloudformation templates. And it will also, in the case, for example, if you create a Lambda, it will build the Lambda and create the whatever we need to upload. So if we go to the cdk.out, we can already see our Cloudformation template. So as you can imagine, if you have even 20 resources to read this, it can be quite tricky. And we can go to the AWS Management Console and search for Cloudformation. And we see that our demo stack is being created. It was actually pretty fast. We see also all the events. So also all the resources that were made, our DynamoDB table. And if we go to DynamoDB, we should see a new table. Oh, I named it events date, but it's just events. Doesn't matter. So that's a pretty straightforward demo on how to provision one resource on AWS. Let's continue and create some more stuff. So let's say we want to interact with this DynamoDB table. We want to first create a Lambda, which is a serverless function. Then we're going to create an API gateway. We're going to create the integration. Then we're going to give DynamoDB some permissions. And as last, we're going to print out the API URL, even though we can read this from the console. So let's start with a create event Lambda, which will take care of creating an event. And I'm going to use the Node.js function construct, which helps us create a serverless function. Create event Lambda. We're going to give it the entry of source/functions/create event.ts. Then we need to set some environment variables. And this is just going to be events table. And because we have the instance of this table, we can just say events table. So we can use this as environment variables to get the name, even though the name is already here. but let's say the name was something else. In this case, it was generated by CDK. So it's good that we get it like that. So now we have our Lambda. We're going to create our API gateway. New HTTP API. This CDK API. That's it. Now we need our integration. Const create event integration. New Lambda proxy integration. And this just takes a handler, which is our create event Lambda. Then we're going to define some resources on the API gateway. So we're going to tell the API gateway, you know, we want a method of HTTP post. We want the path to be /events. And we want the integration to be the create event integration. And as last, we're going to do the events table and grant full access. This is not a best practice. You should always give the least privilege to your resources, but for the sake of the demo, we're just going to give it full access. And then we're done. And I think we can do progen deploy. So it will also give us a summary of all the resources that it will create. We're going to deploy these changes. Yes. And what the create event Lambda does, I mean, it just uses a function to create an event that has a document client for DynamoDB. Nothing out of the ordinary, pretty simple stuff. What's really cool about, you know, these constructs and, you know, writing actual code is that, let's say, for example, I want to create a construct where it creates the Lambda for me, but it also handles the integration and the routing part. So let's see how that looks. This is a construct called Lambda with API Integration, which takes in a few of the properties that we need. It takes a reference to our API gateway. We can define some methods, a path, and we can just return a Lambda that already has its integration. So then when you're gonna define it, it's gonna be something like this instead of the other code that you just saw. So let's see how far we are with the deployment. We can see that it's an update is in progress. Here we can see all the events and the resources that are being made. Also worth noting, the CDK API reference is pretty cool. Like, let's say, for example, we want the API gateway. The documentation is pretty nice. I forgot to mention .NET. And they have pretty good examples on how to use it. And there's also a community website where you can search, for example, let's say I want a construct for passwordless login. Just with one construct, you can implement passwordless authentication with Cognito. So this is also really powerful because people can share their constructs with each other. So let's see, I think this is already done. Then we can go and see our API gateway. and we see CDK API. We see the routes that were made, the post. We also see the integrations. And this is the Lambda that we integrated with this API. And we can test it out. So let's take here. I already have a post already. I can just change the URL. CDK demo. And we're gonna run this. And we got a bad request. I think I made a mistake. Oh man, create event. No. Okay, I think we have time. Let's just see what's going on. We got a 400.
We all know this happens as soon as you start doing live
Man,
coding,
I
so
was
don't
like,
even stress.
I was like, yeah, it's never. So this was just created. So the table name wasn't, I think I made it's events table and not tables. Man. Write your test. Write your tests. Always test.
Yeah, don't worry. I think we've all been in this situation. If you've
Yeah.
done any sort of presentation and tried your hand at live coding, it's bound to happen. I think it makes you a stronger person in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, and I showed you guys something that I wasn't planning to show on the demo, how to, if you have some error in your Lambdas, you can go to CloudWatch and you can see your log groups, search for your Lambda and probably the creation time. And you can see all the logs from there.
Yeah, quite straightforward. It's always overwhelms me going into AWS and kind of everyone knows the basic stuff, but when you're trying to get more in depth with it and trying to actually use it a little bit more intimately, if that's a good word to use, it's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I think it has a threshold, right? For me, it was also a bit overwhelming in the start. It does help to, like I said, like following these learning paths and try to create something from scratch and really build it. It will greatly help getting to know, AWS.
Yeah, I think personally, the best way for me to learn is to fail and keep trying. I always find that actually ending up not knowing what you're doing at the start is an easy way to start learning a lot. You end up in one of those Google rabbit holes where you just eventually understand quantum mechanics.
So this was done. And now we can test our API call again, and hopefully it will work, Dean. Otherwise, we have to talk about something else.
Sure, I might get into my quantum mechanics that I learned last time.
Yeah, so we don't have to get into that now because it did work.
Good news.
So now we can actually show that what we built is on Dynamo. And there is our new entry. So if we create another one, we go here, there it is. So I think, I think this, I can show some other stuff, but I think I want to keep it short. And I think this is also pretty good to spark the curiosity on how CDK works. So let me go back to the presentation. So as you guys saw, it's pretty cool to, build your infrastructure with the code you already know. It feels more natural. And, let me outline for me. Oh, I was supposed to invoke the gods of demo. before I started with the demo, Dean, and that's why it failed.
Yep, that's the most crucial slide. You missed it.
Yeah. So yeah, the pros of CDK for me, using the languages you already know, for me, that's a killer feature. I mean, working on React on the front end, writing serverless functions with TypeScript, and then using TypeScript to define my whole infrastructure is really amazing. I felt like using CDK, you learn as you go, because the code completion is working with you. It's helping you. The documentation is pretty good. I like the idea of creating my own constructs and don't have to repeat myself every time. Maybe I need to create a new infrastructure, or I have to create a new idea, implement a new idea. The idea of also community constructs, I can see this going really far, where as a community we can set standards on how to build resilient infrastructures and share this with the world. For me, it makes the philosophy of you build it and you run it more feasible. Before CDK, it always felt like not really there, or I really need to learn a new way of doing it because somebody thinks that it should be that way. It's also really cool that you can test your infrastructure because it's just code. You can make assertions, you can make snapshot tests. So some cons that I've seen from working with AWS CDK is that, as you guys saw, there is no local development. You have to deploy to see if things work. And there are some paid solutions like LocalStack that help you fix this. The counter argument for this is, it does push you to test your code as much as possible. So writing unit tests and integration tests for the things that you're building. And on the other hand, you're always sure of what you're building. You don't have the whole thing about, it runs on my machine. And maybe another con is also that you're vendor locked into AWS, even though I see a lot of traction into the concept of CDK itself. So I hope in the future we can have some standards where, we can have one standard that will work with Azure and Google Cloud and AWS. I think those are the cons. Probably I'll work more with it and find out more things. And now it's the time to ask some questions.
Perfect. Yeah, unfortunate about missing that slide, right? But it's okay. We got some debugging information out of that, so that's good. Yeah, there are no questions in the Q&A right now, but I'll wait for those to come in. But I do have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
One of them was, are constructs something that you can share, like a Docker image or a code snippet? Or is it something that is like run on AWS that you can just use as a service?
No, because, well, yeah, it's just like a code snippet. Because let's say, for example, the example that I showed about the Lambda web API, this has nothing sensitive about any organization whatsoever. This is just TypeScript. And if I send you this via chat or put it on Stack Overflow, this is just, me sharing code about how I want to build a Lambda with API integration. So it's really powerful.
Yeah. No,
and also really simple.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's really easy. It makes sense as well that you can just share it without kind of compromising any crucial information.
And if you think about, for example, big organizations where, you have to have all these security checks, you can already imagine that, big organizations can use this and leverage this to create constructs that have all these checks built in. So then if you need to start up a new project, it will be just using the constructs library of that organization and then get started.
Nice, nice. So pretty straightforward and easy to get into. The next question is kind of similar to that, I guess, in terms of how to get into it. How should like someone get started if they actually want to get into doing this?
So I made actually, no, it's not here. I made a gist on GitHub. How do I even move this? Yes, let's move it away. I made a gist on GitHub, which is now private, but I will share on how to get started. So how to install CDK, the developer guide, the documentation for the packages, but also 2 really good talks by some awesome people that got me started on AWS CDK. And I think if you see these talks and this with the initial setup, you can already start creating really fast. Like I said, the IDE will help you. So, and you will also get feedback from CDK itself when something is wrong when you try to deploy it. So it's for me, it was pretty straightforward to get started.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the time a bit, as I said initially, overwhelming with the amount of services AWS actually offers. So maybe you just don't know this exists. So it's always nice to have that little push towards it.
Yeah.
Cool. There is one question actually in the Q&A now from Everton Cruz. What exactly does ProGen do again?
Yeah, I forgot to, I think I explained it really quickly, but think of ProGen as an app generator for your project, where in only one file you can define everything that has to do with your project, and this will generate files from this. So for example, our package.json, we're not going to touch that because ProGen will take care of this. Prettier, it will take care of linting, git ignore, dev dependencies, chest, everything you do from this file. So it's automating a lot of stuff and generating these files. So you only have to focus on developing.
Yeah, then I guess it's kind of in the name, ProGen, project generator.
Yeah, they call it an app generator for everything because they have these templates where with, I guess, a template you can generate a whole project structure.
Yeah.
Instead of like defining 40 configuration files, you can let ProGen do the work.
And I guess this is also really useful if you want to share a project scaffold, skeleton, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly, because you can just share this template, and you know that if somebody runs ProGen on the root of a ProGen project, it will generate everything else.
Yeah, and as you said, I think that's what you mentioned. You don't have the issue with it works on my machine. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
Cool. Hopefully that answers the question. Pretty straightforward and pretty useful tool, actually.
Yeah.
Another question. When is it using AD? Let me start that again. When is you? Wow, my body does not want me to ask this question. When is using AWS beneficial over using other cheaper services? Is there like maybe pros and cons over why you would use AWS?
Yeah, I think it depends. But let's say, for example, let's take, I really don't want to name names, but let's take something like Versal, for example, which if you have a free account only for hobby projects, this is fine. But if you have a paid account, you pay like $20, I think. Because the AWS provides a free trial, if you know how to work with AWS, maybe it will be cheaper than those $20 a month. So it really depends. And also because they have these free trials, I mean, honestly, all platforms now have free trials. I guess my answer would be, if you want to learn AWS, then just use AWS, because most of these other platforms are also abstractions on top of AWS. So yeah.
Cool, that makes sense. I mean, in the end, it's just choice, right? A lot of it is exactly the same, or built on top of AWS and just simplifying things.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. One question from Albert: is Progen something that you could use for mono repos as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like I said, like it just provides a way to generate a lot of boilerplate for you. And I know, for example, they added a feature where you can generate even source code from Progen. So yeah, you can set up a whole mono repo around Progen, and probably they have a template for that. The thing is, if you see, for example, the CDK structure, let's say I have a front end and I have some backend serverless functions, I could have this in this project, and let's say I know it doesn't exist now, but I can imagine in a few months, maybe a year, you could literally say like const next.js app is new next.js, and that's a construct, and have your front end there, and then also a construct for your whole Java Spring Boot application, and then have everything there.
Yeah, that would be insane. Honestly.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know if there are any other questions for now, but I'm not sure if there's anything you would like to add. Maybe.
No, not really. I hope the talk was insightful, and at least it sparked some curiosity to try it out.